Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Time once again for another one of our segments that we call Curating Your Movie Library. So right beside me here is my precious wife. The last time we did one of these segments, we talked about a romantic comedy starring Hugh Grant, and we decided to do it again.
Yes, we did.
But what's interesting, maybe it's not interesting, but what's odd is that we have another less than rave review.
Yeah.
This is also another one that we were a little bit disappointed in. The movie we'd like to talk about today is called Did You Hear About the Morgans? And this time, the co-star with Hugh Grant is Sarah Jessica Parker. And I'm hoping you'll be willing to share what you said about her being kind of a distraction in watching the movie. I'm guessing that's a no.
What did I say?
You said,
remind me.
You're talking about the watching her and her face and
like Botox movements.
Yes,
and it was a little bit more distracting. You know, usually when she's in movies, she's a little bit more attractive, and I just didn't think she was very attractive.
Did not pull off the whole Botox thing very well. Kind of scary looking.
Yeah, she was kind of.
Well, I want to say, so just to make sure it doesn't get missed, that for me, the highlight of the movie, certainly the bear scene was good.
That was not a highlight, though, about the Botox.
No.
Okay.
The highlight of the movie was Sam Elliott and Mary Steenburgen.
Yeah.
They were really something. And
yes.
Let's get the basic plot. Hugh Grant and Sarah Jessica Parker are very successful New Yorkers who are working through their divorce after infidelity on the part of Hugh Grant, who is trying to win back Sarah Jessica Parker. And in God's providence, they end up being witnesses to brutal crime and are put in a witness protection program that sends them out to Montana, yes. And so now very much fish out of water for both of them. And a lot of the humor is grounded in that. The two of them falling in love with the movie version of Costco, which they didn't have in New York City. But their sort of hosts or protectors in the movie are Sam Elliott and Mary Steenburgen, who are married and salt of the earth, and
working to help them work their marriage.
Yes,
they see that, and that's an embodiment that they have toward this couple.
Yeah, and listening to Sam Elliott talk in a movie is like listening to Alistair Begg or Sinclair Ferguson preach. It's like, I could do this forever.
Yeah. It's so genuine, isn't it?
Yes, it's just. that voice is just something else. But I would say, I don't know if you would agree, that it was maybe a smidge funnier than 2 Weeks' Notice, but it was also, at some level, a little bit, I don't want to say dark, but some dramatic elements in the sense of their relationship is really struggling based on the reality of his infidelity, but also the fact that they are in danger. And there's sort of the side story of their assistants trying to figure out what's going on and how the bad guys are trying to track them down. And that reminds me a little bit of, you probably didn't see this, but I remember watching 48 Hours at the movie theater with Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy and thinking it was really, really funny. And a week later, looking back and thinking, that was really intense. It wasn't just funny. And so there's a level of intensity here that wasn't in 2 Weeks' Notice, I think.
But there's one thing that you're missing. If you remember, she wanted to conceive and she wasn't able to have a child, so she actually was trying to adopt a child.
Yes.
And he was trying to pursue her not knowing. And I think when I think back on our sacred marriage segments, when we're talking about forgiveness and we're talking about trust, this movie really kind of hit that, are you willing to forgive?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that she claims when she begins to speak to him about his infidelity is she's really just done. She's over that.
Yeah.
And he's trying to tell her how sorry he is. And, you know, it's always good to look at this in the terms of real relationships when you see people trying to put their marriages back together. And in sometimes thinking a child will fix it, you know.
Yeah. But it is nice, and I think that's part of the appeal of romantic comedies is to have they all live happily ever after thing. Yeah, who doesn't love that? Yeah. And you know, to see them together and Sam Elliott and Mary Steenburgen watching them ride off into the sunset, so to speak. It's good.
It is.
I agree. But again, not. I guess in both instances, and given Hugh Grant, and maybe given his whichever one of those Jane Austen stories he's in, my expectation is a level of wittiness in the dialogue, the sharp, snappy dialogue that I think both of them just got a C+ maybe on it, and miss that element.
And do you wonder if it's the chemistry between the actors and the actresses? Because, you know, I've seen him in so many fun movies with Julia Roberts and other women that, you know, he's kind of getting the spotlight with all of the star women, and sometimes there just isn't the same kind of chemistry as like what you see between Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks.
Yeah, or when you think about, I mean, I know you love Miss Congeniality, and I don't even remember who the male lead is in that, but they have that spark in chemistry. Yeah. It could be that. Maybe as a writer, my thought is they should have written Funnier Lights.
When you look at Julia Roberts, one of her greatest movies of all time is Pretty Women, and there was just a really neat romantic intertwining of chemistry between her whole story, and her whole role. I
don't know who put that together, but I do know that at least one of the key scenes in that's funny was unscripted, and it just happened, which tells you something about the chemistry that's going on between the actors. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are running out of time again, but the good news is, having run out of time, we're going to go watch more. We have to go do homework. We have to go...
I think we're done with homework.
No, baby, I mean homework for the podcast. We have to go investigate.
I'm like, we've done school today.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I'm not sure if and when it'll come up, but right now our plan is to go take a second look at Notting Hill. Yay! So it's like Hugh Grant the Hugh Grant channel all day, all the time. I love you, sweetheart.
I love you too.
If everything goes according to my plans, and of course we don't know by any stretch whether or not that will come to pass, but if so, then we are currently, when you're listening to this, 11 days away from celebrating the 500th show from the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, at least its current iteration, the 500th show, which is, I think, quite an accomplishment. And if you remember in an earlier appeal segment a week or so ago, I mentioned to you that it would really be a deep blessing to us if on this occasion we would hear from you. We would love to hear from you. Again, what is it that you're liking? What is it you're not liking at show 500? What have you learned? What's changed? What have you been strengthened on? In that particular appeal segment, I talked about how it takes some level of commitment or at least I say put it this way, it takes some level of confidence that something's going to be there for the long haul before we're ready to commit to it. Well, I think 500 episodes is a pretty good sign that we're here for the long haul. So again, I want to hear from you. I would love if you haven't supported the work of the podcast, but you've been blessed by it and you have opportunity to give. I'd love to have you do just that. On the occasion of this anniversary, you can go to rcsproulJR.com, and there's a donate button right there that'll walk you through the process. Donations are, in fact, tax deductible. But I also want to spend some time today talking about the board meeting that we had earlier this week for Dunamis Fellowship. Dunamis Fellowship, you may remember, is the sort of parent organization of the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, as well as Sovereign Grace Fellowship Church and assorted other things. And in fact, the bulk of our time together at this meeting was talking about our plans for the Shepherd's College. What we've been talking to you about a time or two in different media, our plans to prepare a program for preparing men for gospel ministry that is much more biblically grounded than academically grounded. And that board meeting went very, very well. I was very encouraged. The board was excited about what it is we're working on. They want me to invest time and energy in laying out the plan, and I've been working on that. And we are looking again for long-term supporters for this work. We're trying to remake what it means to be prepared for gospel ministry. One of the sort of shorthand ways that I described it is that what I want to do is take the ideas that you find in my book, When You Rise Up, which is about homeschooling, and apply them in this context of preparing men for gospel ministry. That is, that book affirms, as I think every homeschooler would, that education is discipleship. Discipleship's not a part of education. It's not something to put on top of education. It is education. And that's true whether you're teaching your own children or whether you're teaching in a college setting. Or again, secondly, another thing that sets this program apart is that it is profoundly committed to relationship along the way. That this is not a situation where you sign up and you get information downloaded from the professor into your brain. This is a sort of a mentoring discipleship kind of program. Yes, you will learn. Yes, you will study. Yes, you will write. But all of this will be done in the context of being a part of your own local church. It's not something that's going to require you to pack up your family and move, and you can come away prepared and ready to go. I'm going to continue to be talking off and on about the Shepherd's College and sharing with you, but I wanted you to know today that we're hard at it. I am hitting the ground with my feet running, trying to get everything in place up, and when we get a website, we'll let you know, and we have everything ready to go for applications. We'll let you know. We're working on those things, trying to get everything in place so that when we're ready to launch, you'll be ready to ride with us. Thanks so much for listening. Though they will not be published in this order, I'll give you another peek behind the corner and confess that I just finished a moment ago recording that segment that's part of our Ism Tuesday, and specifically the segment I did on tritheism, the belief that there are three gods. And I thought it would be fitting in doing now our Atin lay segment for the week that we would tackle this Latin phrase: Finitum non capax infinitum. Finitum non capax infinitum. Finitum is F-I-N-I-T-U-M. New word non, N-O-N. New word capax or capax, C, as in Charlie, A, P as in Paul, O-X. Infinitum is just like finitum with an I-N in the front. Finitum non capax infinitum, which simply means the finite cannot contain or grasp the infinite. I sent folks away when I did this segment on tritheism, encouraging them to do a deeper study on the unity of the members of the Trinity. And I turned off the microphone and I thought, well, what are they going to come to? It's not like there's information out there that if you know where to look, you can find it. It's a very difficult thing. It's very mysterious, the Trinity. And so this is why I decided to take a look at this phrase. Because what it's trying to affirm is something that should be obvious to us all, that the infinite God is too big to fit into our finite minds. It's a way of describing what is called the incomprehensibility of God. Now, I'm going to have to make a warning like I always do. When we speak about the incomprehensibility of God, in normal, ordinary language, when we use that word incomprehensible, what we typically mean is it's gibberish, it's nonsense. We can't understand it in the least. But technically and carefully, that is in fact not what the word means. There's a great, great difference between saying something cannot be understood at all, which is the misunderstood way of using that word, and saying something cannot be understood completely, absolutely. Incomprehensibility is saying God cannot be grasped fully. Now, back, 75, 80 years ago, there was a pushback against theological liberalism that went by the name of neo-orthodoxy. It wasn't very much better than theological liberalism and very quickly descended into theological liberalism. But while it was there, it was opposed to theological liberalism. And it was very zealous to affirm the transcendence of God. And God would be described this way. God is totaliter aliter. Totaliter aliter. Wholly other. W-H-O-L-Y. Not H-O-L-Y, but W-H-O-L-Y. Wholly other. Now, it's a good thing to affirm the transcendence of God. It's a bad thing to affirm that he's wholly other for this simple reason. If God is absolutely 100% completely different from us, then we cannot have a point of connection. We cannot have a point of connection by which we can communicate with each other. The reality is that there is overlap between what we are and what he is. There is distinction and there's commonality. There are communicable attributes of God, attributes that he has infinitely, that we have finitely. So there is a connection. He's not wholly other. Which means, again, that there are things about him that we can understand and things that we are called to understand. We don't want finitum non capax infinitum to take us to the place where, and I'm sure you've been in this place, you're having a discussion about some difficult theological concept, and either you or your partner sort of gets backed into a corner, and they're faced with a dilemma, a contradiction, and their solution to escape this contradiction is not to abandon one of the two ideas that contradict each other, but instead to say, well, God's bigger than we are. God's incomprehensible. God's ways are not our ways. Well, that's all true. But it doesn't mean that God is irrational. He can't be irrational. He is a God of order. And so our inability to grasp everything does not mean we can grasp nothing. And if God were transcendent over the basic laws of logic, which are actually a part of who he is, a part of his character. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was God, and the Logos was with God. It's part of his character. without that, we couldn't know anything, because everything means its opposite. So, we want to embrace the humility at the root of finitum non capax infinitum and recognize we can't know everything. But we don't want to fall off the other side of the horse and end up affirming that we can know nothing. God has revealed himself. As Francis Schaeffer said, he is there and he is not silent. So let us push the envelope as we seek to learn more about him, while never losing sight of the fact that he is infinite, and we most assuredly are not. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.